everybody, welcome back to I Will Be Okay Thursday. For this week's video, I want to discuss why I distanced myself from the New Age spirituality movement, and specifically I'm going to focus on toxic positivity and my journey to and through the movement. So I was raised Roman Catholic, particularly in a Mexican-Polish heritage on the south side of Chicago, and in both of these cultures, Catholicism is taken very seriously. I was very fortunate to be born into a family that was quite open-minded and liberal, so there was room for me to not be religious. However, I was sent to Catholic school my entire adolescent life, so grammar school and high school. I went to all-girls Catholic high school. And, in these schools, you're indoctrinated into the religion, into the belief system. For quite a while, I was very religious. Jokingly, a lot of my friends used to say that they thought I was going to be a nun. When I was 13, particularly, I was very religious. I went to confession once a month. I attended mass regularly. I kept a pocketbook in my pocket, which I would write, all my sins down in it as I sinned, so then when I would go to confession, I would have my pocketbook full of sins in my pocket already. Which, looking back on it, is a pretty disturbing behavior, but at the time, I thought that was how I would reach some type of salvation. That's how I thought that I should be if I wanted my life to be good. I was taught that if I didn't do these things, I would either be rewarded or punished, and my childhood was not exactly a cakewalk. And there was a point where things in my family got very bad, and that was in part why I became so religious, because I was like, oh, maybe because I'm not going to confession, because I'm not going to mass, because I'm not confessing my sins, because XYZ is the reason why all these things are happening in my family. So unfortunately, I did not have the capacity to understand the full scope of what was happening at that time in my life. Anyway, I always felt a really deep and powerful connection to something beyond me. And as a kid, I thought I could reach, or I could understand what that was through Catholicism. But as I got older and, continually felt more strongly about gay rights and women's rights, I was like, yeah, this is not the answer for me. This is not, there's some major cognitive dissonance happening. I was, at many points in my adolescent life, very mentally ill, and it seemed like the Catholicism was inflaming it. It wasn't making it better for me. It seemed to make me feel like I couldn't accept things about myself which were very real. It made me feel like I wasn't good. I wasn't good enough. There was a lot of guilt and shame, and I had to get out of it. I did begin questioning things very young. I think at 8 years old, I asked my parents, I was like, Jesus was Jewish, so I don't understand why we're Catholic. I was like, why aren't we Jewish? And my parents basically were like, I don't know. It was just because our family was Catholic that we were Catholic. So I was like, okay, and this wasn't a very good answer for me. I'm very much like a truth seeker type person, and when I was about 18, I started, or 17 or 18, I started telling people that I'm Tashist. So Tasha is my nickname, and so basically what I was trying to tell people is that I'm my own religion. I didn't want to identify with a religion. Disidentifying from Catholicism was honestly a huge step for me, because you're so used to being like, yeah, I'm Catholic, or, when there's check one that applies. What religion are you? Catholic, and now. And I was like, I don't want to check that box anymore. I went through a series of really interesting events in my life when I was 19, and through those events, I was introduced to Buddhism. And through Buddhism, I was then introduced to a lot of New Age thinking, and this is kind of really when I entered into the community. So when I was between the ages of 17 and 19, I slowly got very, very involved with the rave community in America. And when I was 19, I became absolutely obsessed. And I wrote a research paper in school about the culture of raves. Through the course of doing this research paper, I found that there was a very pertinent spiritual community that I had no idea of before. And so there were these kind of like known figures in the rave community that would post like these incredibly enlightening posts on Instagram and Twitter, and I followed all these people and I just got like so deep into it. When I was 19, I experienced now what I refer to as either a spiritual awakening or a major transformation in my conscious awareness. It was a moment where I felt like I finally separated from being the thinker in my head to being the observer of my thoughts. And being able to finally be in a place within myself where I could see my emotions and see my thoughts and not just be my thoughts and just be my emotions was life-changing, absolutely life-changing. There is, I don't know if you know or have seen, you know, this, usually it's in a figurine or picture of the Buddha laughing, and they say that he's laughing because he's laughing at his thoughts. And I'll never forget like the moment I had where I finally separated myself from my very high and deep anxiety and finally laughed at the thoughts that were in my head. It was just so freeing. I finally felt like I was alive. You know, like before that I felt like I was just constantly in this robotic type consciousness, like almost an autopilot. I became obsessed with researching what happened to me, what was that experience, what was that, and I got really deep into reading so many different books and started meeting a lot of people in the community in Chicago and in London and all the different places that I've lived. I felt like there was a point where I started losing sight of the real like essence of, you know, why I had basically woke up from being the thinker and just the thinker, and, you know, learning to just take care of myself genuinely, psychologically, and in doing so take better care of my relationships and be at peace. It became me getting really lost in a lot of the ideologies in the New Age movement, and a big problem in the New Age movement is toxic positivity. It's people thinking that you always need to be in this enlightened state or whatever that understanding is of the New Age movement, which I feel has tended to be very positive in a way that is incredibly bypassing, and positive as well in a way where you like don't want to face reality, and positive in a way where you ignore human emotions. Like, for example, when, you know, something bad happens and you're like, oh, it's okay, it's meant to be like that. This is the plan of the universe, it's how it's meant to be. When in reality, you're very depressed or you're very sad, or what happened just like really upset you. There was like this, and I am guilty of it, it's like when things were happening in my life, I'd be like, oh, well, that's just how it's supposed to be. It's all part of a divine plan, yeah. But then deep inside, there were all these very sad feelings that I was harboring. So the New Age spiritual movement is very much a self-spirituality at its core. It's very much a movement which celebrates the releasing of negative self-limiting beliefs, correcting negative inner speech, you know, believing that you are of your own authority and responsibility, and that your freedom as a human being is very much a priority in the New Age movement. Now, these things don't sound very bad, but unfortunately, you know, you have people in the movement who will take these ideologies and take them to an extreme, where, I've noticed a lot in the New Age movement that this self-spirituality has actually become quite narcissistic. It's not really about what you can do for the sacred, but what the sacred can do for you. I feel like I've seen countless quotes that are like, change your thoughts. Just change your thoughts. It's just your thoughts. Your thoughts are negative, and that's why it's like this. So you can't find a good partner because you don't love yourself enough. All these ridiculous mantras, to be honest. Now, when we're telling people just change your thoughts, now there are certain situations where absolutely that can work. Yes, sometimes there are things where you just need to change your perspective 100%. But when you're speaking to somebody who has PTSD, when you're speaking to somebody who has very deeply rooted trauma, just telling them like, just change your thoughts is not going to work. That's not the solution to the issue. And I think that when it comes to this toxic positivity in the New Age movement, it very much highlights that. It very much highlights overlooking very deeply rooted conditioning, very deeply rooted traumatic experiences, and saying like, oh, well, because you don't love yourself enough, that's why you're not finding a good boyfriend. It's like, and I've had people say that to me, which is also why I'm saying it. And I remember reaching this point where I was like, damn, I like really love myself and I'm single. I went through this time where I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm being myself, I love myself. However, I'm not finding like this perfect boyfriend. And that's the thing, that's the problem. Like, just because you love yourself doesn't mean that it's gonna magically bring all these amazing people in your life. What it does mean is that you're gonna be able to navigate things with more strength. It means that you're gonna be able to deal with things in your life and not equate it to your worth. It means that if you love yourself, that you'll be happier being content within yourself, and then maybe if you do end up in a relationship, you won't be using that person as a way to make yourself feel good, but that person will add to you feeling well. So it's again this inverted way of seeing things like, well, if I do this, then I will get this result, when that is not always the case. You will feel a certain way within yourself, hopefully good, but that doesn't mean you're going to get this direct result. It could mean that. It could mean that. But I know horrible people who are married. I know horrible people who are in a relationship. I know horrible people who have amazing partners. So how does that work? How does that come into play? I'm going to read a couple quotes. The first quote I'm going to read to you says, and this was in regards to the counterculture which started in the 1960s, which is not far off today. Today it's just in a different costume. One can think of the counterculture in terms of three main orientations: that directed at changing the mainstream, for example, the political activists engaged in civil rights or anti-Vietnam demonstrations; that directed at rejecting mainstream disciplines to live the hedonistic life, the decadent world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll; and that directed at finding ways of life which serve to nurture the authentic self. Now, all these descriptions definitely still present themselves today. But what's so interesting to me is how, in particular, this need to feel positive all the time, this feel-good spirituality, this notion to eliminate all negativity, has hedonism yet found its way into the New Age? I'm not saying that we should not have positive attitudes towards things. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be optimistic. What I am saying, though, is that when we want to or think that we can eliminate all negativity within ourselves, we take away a really important part of our human growth, which is being able to see the shit within ourselves and be honest about it and then be willing to correct it. But by denying that it's there, inevitably you will repress very natural parts of your human experience. And I think you miss out a lot on growth when people do this. I feel like Christianity has in ways found itself to seep through the New Age movement, which I wonder if we can completely blame ourselves, because I think a lot of people a part of the New Age movement were raised in a Christian home, so your foundation and your model of understanding a lot of things was based in Christian ideology. You know, we went from shaming ourselves, you know, from not being this perfect Christian, and then to not being this super positive, happy, love and light typed New Age person. It's the same thing, but literally in a different costume. So when I was still very deeply involved in the culture, which I am still in many ways, but in different ways now, which I think are much healthier, I read so many books, and one book which I still love, and I still think that it is an incredible book, is The Power of Now. The Power of Now is a book written by Eckhart Tolle, and basically the essence of the book is talking about how you can reach a state of enlightenment by being in the now. Now, this book, I think it's very important for people to not take what he is saying literally. You have to look beyond his words, which is what he says, but I think that a lot of people have taken it quite literally, which is where the danger is. Now, one of the quotes that he says, which I'll read to you, "You are shown how to free yourself from enslavement to the mind. Enter into this enlightened state of consciousness and sustain it in everyday life." Now, speaking in analytical terms, you will never be completely conscious of everything. Never. It's not humanly possible. You can, however, at least I think always be in a state of being willing to learn. I think that you can be in a state of, I want to be better than the person I was in this previous moment. And I think that for me personally, I think that that's what enlightenment means. I don't think enlightenment means that you need to be in this constant state of bliss. Thinking that you will always be in some particular state when things come up or when things happen is, it's bullshit. Eckhart Tolle does say that you're not always going to be happy, that it is a fleeting emotion, and so I'm very happy that he says that. However, you still see in the New Age movement how much people detest their negative feelings and negative emotions, and how they're not genuinely trying to integrate the underlying causes of those negative human emotions, which is where the real change happens. One of the most amazing quotes I read last year was about human consciousness, and how human consciousness is limitless in its ability to expand, and that the goal with therapy is to encourage that expansion of consciousness. Now, for me, and maybe it's just because of my experiences with the word enlightenment, I've become a little bit turned off to that wording. And expansion and expanding my consciousness to include my experience and to have space around things that happen in my experience to be able to change and make changes where I need to has been a lot more helpful of a wording for me personally. So this state or feeling or experience of being at one with this energy that animates all of existence, I think you can reach that in a state of meditation. I think you can reach that or feel that in moments with yourself of deep reflection. I've experienced it, and it's interesting because there was a point where I felt like I didn't want to leave that state of being because I was like, oh my gosh, this just feels so nice. And I think that a lot of people as well take that to an extreme where Jung would say it's an over-identification with the unconscious. You're not supposed to live in the unconscious. You are a human being right now for whatever reason. And if there's anything you're meant to think right now, maybe just think that you're meant right now to be human for some fucking reason under the sun. I want to read this quote by David Tacey, who has been very critical of the New Age movement and how it has appropriated Jung, which will be in another video that I do talking about how Jung is not a guru. Anyway, the quote is, "The instinct for life and individual existence has been eclipsed in such people, and there has been a suspension of normal human feeling towards suffering and crisis. The human loss is brushed away as meaningless because they see before them the approaching glory of nirvana and non-being." When people become way too overly identified with the unconscious, I have really seen people distance themselves too much from the human experience. There needs to be a balance. I think there needs to be this understanding that, like, if you really believe that you are a soul experiencing human life, you still need to understand that this experience is very real and you're here to interact through it. That doesn't mean that you think to yourself like, oh, well, this is meaningless now. Actually, I think understanding that you are a soul and you're in a human body experiencing a human life actually makes it more meaningful. You know, I don't want to take away from the vital need for, you know, positive self-talk and contentment within oneself. What I'm really trying to say in this video is that when we need to watch where our extremities come in, and we need to watch where our conditioning has come in and seeped through into what we're trying to correct. The New Age movement, I think, is still and was an incredible opportunity for people to still explore themselves spiritually outside of oppressive religious structures. However, the New Age has still not included into its framework the reality of darkness, moral responsibility, and the real understanding of trauma. And these things are really dangerous, because you try to be positive all the time, it's pretty pathological. You know, if you don't allow yourself to be a human being, you will have trouble. There is a really great quote I would like to read from Carl Jung, which says, "The principal aim of psychotherapy is not to transport the patient to an impossible state of happiness, but to help him acquire steadfastness and philosophic patience in the face of suffering. Life demands for its completion and fulfillment a balance between joy and sorrow. Happiness is itself poisoned if the measure of suffering has not been fulfilled. Behind a neurosis there is so often concealed all the natural and necessary suffering the patient has been unwilling to bear." In conclusion, I hope that with this video I can help to shed light on some toxicity in the movement when it comes to, you know, positivity and thinking positive only and ignoring very real and deep negativity. And the next video, I'm going to talk about the dangers of the soulmate and twin flame relationship narrative. So, thanks for watching, and see you next time.